Ladies and gentlemen, the Democratic Party disarmament of the United States is upon us. And if you're not prepared, the time to do so may have expired. Today, I'm going to give you a history lesson. Sit back, listen, be amazed, and be appalled. You are listening to the Closet Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Wright. Let's get started. Folks, there isn't one of you listening today that was alive in the year 1919. But on June the 28th of that year, the victorious Allied powers in the First World War signed the Treaty of Versailles, which formally ended the war that was supposed to end all wars. And at that moment, ladies and gentlemen, the nation of Germany was decimated, economically, politically, and socially. And almost overnight, the German currency wasn't even worth the paper it was printed on. No, a loaf of bread went from 2 Reichsmarks to 2 billion. And at that moment, the nation of Germany was decimated, economically, politically, and socially. And almost overnight, the German currency wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. A loaf of bread went from 2 Reichsmarks to 2 billion. The country's population was in ruin. German business was now occupied by foreign allied powers of Britain, France, and the United States. And the pride of being German meant absolutely nothing. The people of Germany forgot who they were. Their basic sense of pride led to the rise of man who promised to restore their dignity and their sense of belonging. And that man, folks, was Adolf Hitler. And in just 20 years, Hitler and the Nazi Party transformed the nation and Europe's continent and threw the entire world into a war. Fundamental freedoms were stripped from everyday citizens, the right to vote, the right to protest, the right to assemble, all gone. The right to religion, the freedom of speech, education, and property were all now rights that were dissolved. Everyone in Germany and across Europe was directly under the control of an authoritarian government. Folks, if you did not belong to the Nazi Party in the late 20s and the 1930s, you were an outcast. You had no rights, you had no freedoms, and you were left defenseless against Hitler and his totalitarian government. The radical government controlled the schools and what books you could read. The media was nothing more than a propaganda machine of the regime. And in just 20 short years, Germans went from defeat on the Western Front battlefield to defenseless, soulless shells of humans who found themselves obeying just a few. And in 20 short years, Adolf Hitler and his radical government were responsible for actions that left 75 million people dead, 40 million of those civilians. The Nazi Party were radical right-wingers, intolerant of those who disagreed with them and their political platform. Now, I want you to fast forward to today, the year 2020. The entire world again has been thrown into despair. This time, no, it wasn't armed conflict that led to the economic, political, and social collapse. No, now, it is American Democratic and their disarmament led by the Democratic Party due to a carefully thought out and masterfully implemented strategy of today's American liberals. Like in the 1930s under Hitler's power, a nation is under attack from within. And the culprit? It's government. From its seats of power, radical politicians have infiltrated our educational system and judicial systems. Leaders of our regime almost entirely control our media, and any resistance is met with absolute assault. The right to an unbiased education, the right to an accurate and free press, the right to religion and to freely assemble, and the right to defend your life and your property are now all under attack from the liberals and the United States government. In 1932, Hitler and the Nazis manipulated and stole the national elections that led to his power rise. In the year 2020, the American electoral system was stolen by the Democratic Party, and now our nation and our people, like Germany and its citizens in the 1930s and in the 1940s, are on a collision course with disaster. For more than a generation, liberals in this country have taken over our national educational system, and like Hitler in his youth, adolescents are lied to about their history. They're taught to hate who they are and where they come from. And instead, a new made-up history is taught and eventually believed by our nation's young people. For over a generation, our nation's media has been overwhelmed and taken hostage by liberals and the Democratic Party. And now enter social media, and the message of intolerance and anti-conservative hatred spreads like wildfire. Just this week, the American people, as a direct result of the Democratic Party's involvement in our press, intentionally withheld information into the investigation of Hunter Biden and what involvement his daddy, President-elect Joe Biden, may have had into communist China and foreign affairs that will indeed illustrate foreign participation and control of today's liberal politicians. Sitting Democratic members and leaders of our National Intelligence Committee are also under investigation, which links China and their use of sex and backroom business dealings that paved the way for weakness for our nation. Today, an American gun manufacturer was raided by the ATF for making firearm components that liberals in this country believe are illegal and go against their measure of canceling the constitutional rights of Americans in this country to keep and bear arms. Ladies and gentlemen, history has returned. Some of the worst actions in our world are back to haunt us. Only this time, America finds herself as threatened by its own government. Liberals in this country only have one goal in mind: to lie, cheat, and steal their way into power. And like Hitler before and during the Second World War, all adversaries are eliminated. Under Joe Biden, an absolute government is taking shape. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who are unprepared, the time has come and gone. Your rights are being stripped from you, and for many in this country, you either do not care or you are too duped to understand that the Democratic Party and their platform is here to dismantle our nation's republic. Liberals in this country have crafted a way to take away your sense of pride and to make you feel guilty for where you are in life and where you come from. And to replace, Democrats have institutionalized their way of thinking to replace what you know with what they want you to know and who they will demand that you become. Our nation is fighting a silent war for survival, and if you do not believe me, you are part of the problem. Pacifism will get you nowhere in life, and if you do not believe me, please take a look at the 40 million civilians who paid the ultimate price in World War II for merely obeying what their government told them to do. Our republic was founded on freedom, and it is those principles that make us truly American. It isn't the lazy and lunatic policies of liberal politicians. No. It is the bloodshed of 250 years by the brave men and women who died fighting and for preserving our rights to make us truly American. Our time to fight for our freedom is now. Do not delay, for if you do, you will indeed find yourself under the iron fist of democratic socialism. This is Eric Wright, and you have been listening to the Closet Conservative Podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast. Please remember to give a 5-star review and share our podcast with your friends. The Closet Conservative Podcast is a production of The Liberty Loft. Copyright The Liberty Loft, 2020. You can find more shows and information on our website, www.thelibertyloft.com, or any of our social media channels.